3 years after being cast out of the Hawke family, Eleanor Hawke walked into my shop for a pair of custom shoes. As it happened, I was the one assigned to her. I knelt reflexively, ready to help her with her shoes, but she stopped me, her hand on my arm. "Julian," she said, her voice laced with surprise. "What are you doing working a job like this?" It seemed she never imagined that her once pampered heir would now be serving others with such practiced humility. I used her grip to help myself up, and in the same smooth motion, talked her into putting $200,000 on a store card. She did it without hesitation. As she was leaving, she asked a little too carefully, "Julian, do you still hate me?" I gave her a perfect, professional smile and saw her out the door. The moment she was gone, I asked my manager for a transfer to another branch. I didn't hate her anymore. But I never wanted anything to do with the Hawke family again. It was pouring rain when I got off work. Eleanor's Maybach was parked by the curb, its hazard lights blinking. She rolled down the window and called out to me, "Julian, let me give you a ride home." I glanced at the rideshare app on my phone. The wait was endless. I wisely accepted her offer. Life has taught me one crucial lesson. Never pass up an opportunity for comfort. Otherwise, your entire existence becomes a trial. The driver was still Arthur. He grinned when he saw me. "Young Master Julian, you look different. More grounded," he continued. "A bit like your father." "Arthur, just drive," Eleanor said sharply from the back. My father's death was a wound that never healed for any of us. The slightest mention was enough to make it ache. A soft classical piece began to play through the car's speakers. Eleanor had looked like she wanted to say something, but the mention of my father had silenced her. She leaned back against the leather, her expression weary and dark. I took a pause in the music to speak. "Arthur, you can just call me Julian. I haven't been the young master of the Hawke family for a long time." Arthur just kept smiling, unfazed by Eleanor's mood. "It's just a title, son. A habit of many years." Hearing Arthur's warm, steady voice, I couldn't help but smile. When I was 14, at the peak of my rebellious phase, Eleanor brought home a boy she was sponsoring. His name was originally Caleb, but after learning he was an orphan, Eleanor had him take our name. She thought his given name was common, so she renamed him Caleb Hawke. I was Julian Hawke, he was Caleb Hawke. But everyone always said how polite and thoughtful Caleb was. How it was no wonder Eleanor doted on him. As for me, I was arrogant and spoiled, not nearly as composed as the boy from the mountains. A rebellious teenager has his pride. I wouldn't let him outshine me. I berated every gossiping servant in the house until I was exhausted. I sat down to catch my breath, only to see Eleanor standing around the corner, her eyes filled with disgust. And next to her stood Caleb, dressed in the latest designer clothes, looking smug. I knew it was his doing. Ever since he arrived, everything I did was twisted to make me look like a bully. I had been friendly to him at first, but he would always act hesitant and wounded. Within days, rumors were flying that the Hawke heir looked down on commoners. I swore to Eleanor, argued, collapsed into her arms in a desperate hug, and pleaded, "Mom, why don't you believe me?" She just sighed. "Julian, when will you ever grow up?" She always thought I was a lost cause. She seemed to forget that she once promised, "No matter what Julian does, Mommy will always have your back." I wanted to rip the mask off Caleb's face and show her the ugliness underneath. But what I said was, "What gives you the right to wear something like that?" The clothes were from a new collection. He couldn't have worn them without her permission. Her favoritism had been there all along. I was just too stupid to see it, too desperate to win a game that was already lost. The day after that, Caleb's name was legally changed. He became the sole heir of the Hawke family, and I became a complete joke. Only 2 people ever stood by my side, my father and Arthur. My father was always busy with work and carried a deep guilt towards my mother. Even when he knew I was being wronged, his only solution was to give me more money. This only made Eleanor despise me more, believing I was a greedy manipulator. Arthur was originally my father's driver. After hearing that Caleb was being bullied, Eleanor assigned Arthur to drive him, a clear message that the entire household stood behind Caleb. But no matter how Caleb tried to win him over, Arthur remained unmoved, never saying more than was necessary. With me, however, he was different. "Young master," he'd say, "it's getting cold. Make sure you wear a coat." When he saw me withdrawn and miserable, he tried to comfort me. "She's your mother, son. Deep down, she still loves you." Did she? I had stopped believing that a long time ago, but I was still grateful for his kindness. A dark cloud of scorn hung over me, and Arthur was the only one who ever tried to let a little light through. The car slowed. I knew we were close to my place. "Arthur, you can just stop here. The alley ahead is a nightmare to get in and out of." Eleanor seemed to wake from a trance, her eyes widening in shock as she took in the rundown neighborhood. "Julian, you live here?" I just smiled and gave a polite farewell. "Thank you for the ride, Mrs. Hawke. I won't take up any more of your time." Pain flickered in her eyes. "Do you have to speak to me like that?" I simply bowed my head. Then I opened my umbrella and walked alone into the heavy curtain of rain. When I got home, I saw a new friend request on my phone. The name was simply Mom. My manager had told me Mrs. Hawke had specifically asked for my contact information. She'd praised my service and added $2 million to her store card. "Keep this client happy, Julian," he'd said, "and you'll be our top salesman for the year." I hesitated, but the thought of Leo's medical bills made me accept. "Thank you for your support, Mrs. Hawke, smiley face, smiley face." I typed. The status indicator showed she was typing for a long time. I waited, wondering what she could possibly be writing. Eventually, I gave up and went to take a shower. When I came back, I saw a string of retracted messages. Only one remained. "Your father's memorial is the day after tomorrow. Will you come?" The message triggered a night of relentless nightmares, replaying the events that had destroyed my life. Caleb had been suddenly diagnosed with leukemia. He needed a bone marrow transplant, and I was the only match. But my own health was poor at the time, and I was undergoing treatment. I refused. I was ready to give up everything, to leave the Hawke family and never look back. The night before I was set to leave, Eleanor sat me down for a talk. She reminisced about my childhood, how I was a messy little boy, and she had dreamed of raising a perfect prince. How for her birthday, I had dressed up in a flamboyant suit to make her happy, only to be scolded for being too ostentatious. How I'd cried in the middle of the night, telling her, "I just wanted to make you happy, Mommy." How in elementary school, I'd overheard other parents mocking her for being a bad mother because of my poor grades, and I'd studied relentlessly to get a perfect score, losing so much weight in the process that my chin was sharp against her shoulder. "It hurts my shoulder," she'd said, "but it hurts my heart more." She looked at me with a misty, nostalgic gaze. "Julian, do you still love your mother like you did when you were a little boy?" "Of course," I'd answered. "But Mom, do you still love me?" "Of course." If only I had seen the flicker of evasion in her eyes through the dim light. If only I hadn't taken that glass of water she'd drugged. I collapsed into her arms. I remember her soft fingers on my cheek, gently wiping away a tear. But when I woke up, it was to an ice-cold reality. My own mother had drugged me so they could take my bone marrow for Caleb. The procedure left me bedridden and weak for months. Lying alone in that sterile hospital room, I had only one thought: revenge. To hell with her. From that day on, she was no longer my mother. She was just that woman. I stormed back to the Hawke estate, weak and shivering in a thin hospital gown. They were celebrating Caleb's birthday. I took a baseball bat and demolished the entire ground floor of the mansion. If security hadn't stopped me, I would have caved their heads in. I screamed until my throat was raw, the rage in my eyes making that woman shrink back in fear, right into Caleb's waiting arms. Their solution was to have me committed to a psychiatric hospital. If my father hadn't returned when he did, I would have ended up either a mindless vegetable or a corpse. He returned with the truth. The leukemia, the transplant, it was all a lie, a scheme cooked up by Caleb. His real target was my fiancée. My engagement to Isabella Vance had been arranged since we were children. The Vance family's new energy enterprise had made them far more powerful than the Hawkes. No matter how hard that woman tried to push Caleb into high society, she could never find him a better match. So Caleb had been secretly corresponding with Isabella for months. And I had worked tirelessly to earn the approval of Isabella's parents, finally securing my place in their family. Now with the truth revealed, that woman just held Caleb and wept. "In that case," she declared, "Caleb should marry Isabella. What else can we do? We can't lose our connection to the Vance family." As for Julian, she glanced at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, before looking away. "You can have the villa in Northwood. You can move there today." I had grown up in Southwood. She was banishing me to the other side of the city. I didn't want to stay in that house a moment longer, but I would not let them get away with this so easily. My father flew into a rage, but she just sobbed. What was I supposed to do? "I finally have a son who loves me. Are you asking me to lose him too? It's because you were never here. I had to raise him alone. If I can only have one son," she screamed, "it will be Caleb. If you make him leave, I'll go with him." In the end, my father gave in. The day I left, he said, "Wait for your mother to come to her senses. Don't hate her." He didn't understand. I hated him too, for his weakness. I left without saying goodbye. I became a snake, coiled in the darkness, waiting. I watched as Caleb and Isabella got married. I watched that woman beam with joy at the wedding. I heard that Isabella had bought Caleb a yacht, and they threw extravagant parties. The media called Caleb a golden boy, the savior of the Hawke-Vance alliance. One day, my father called me. "Isabella is pregnant. The morning sickness is hitting her hard." Then after a pause, "Julian, it's been a while. Are you feeling better?" I heard myself answer, my voice wooden. "No. The doctors say the damage is permanent." Everything after that happened in slow motion. I drove to the hospital. I saw that woman helping Isabella out of a car, laughing and chatting. I saw my father and Caleb walking side by side, a perfect picture of father and son. I pressed my foot on the accelerator. Faster. Faster. I was going to kill him at the peak of his happiness. I was innocent. Why did he deserve a life of joy? Their faces turned to masks of horror. My father shoved Caleb out of the way. He hit the windshield, blood blooming across the spiderweb of cracks before he fell away. I slammed on the brakes, my chest colliding with the steering wheel, a tearing pain ripping through me. The car door was wrenched open. I was dragged out. That woman beat me over the head with her handbag. Something sharp cut my face. A flurry of slaps. The police came. They took me away. My father's last words were, "Don't blame Julian." But that woman and the Vance family hired the best lawyers. They pushed for the maximum sentence. The day I was sent to prison, they told me Isabella had lost the baby due to the shock. I smiled. "You monster," they screamed. "How can you still smile?" Continued from the prompt. The morning of the memorial was gray, the sky pressing down on the city like a bruise. I stood in front of the mirror in my small, damp apartment, adjusting the tie I had bought from a thrift store. It was black, silk, and slightly frayed at the edges, much like myself. Leo, my roommate and the only reason I hadn't stepped off a bridge 3 years ago, coughed from the other room. The sound was wet and heavy. The $2 million Eleanor had put on the card would cover his next round of dialysis and get us on the transplant list. That was the transaction. That was the only reason I was going back into the viper's nest. "You don't have to go, Jules," Leo rasped, leaning against the doorframe. He was skeletal, a ghost of the man who had protected me during my first week in prison when the other inmates learned I was a rich kid killer. "It's billable hours," I said, checking my watch. 2 hours of acting. That's $1,000 a minute. I arrived at the cemetery in a taxi. The Hawke family plot was a sprawling manicured garden, distinct from the crowded rows where normal people were buried. As I approached the crowd of black umbrellas, the air shifted. The whispers started instantly. The patricide. The ex-convict. The monster. I saw them standing by the grave. Eleanor, looking frail and hollowed out, clutching a handkerchief. And beside her, Caleb. He looked good. Healthy. The leukemia had miraculously vanished years ago, leaving him with a glow of vitality that wealth buys. He was holding Isabella's hand. Isabella, my childhood sweetheart, the woman who had promised to wait for me, looked entirely different. Her face was gaunt, her eyes darting nervously. The rumors were true. The miscarriage had broken something in her, and life with Caleb hadn't fixed it. I walked straight to the headstone. I didn't look at them. I looked at the photo of my father embedded in the granite. "Don't blame Julian." His last words. The words that had saved my soul while condemning me to a lifetime of guilt. "You have some nerve showing up here," a voice hissed. I turned. Caleb was standing there, his face contorted in a sneer that didn't quite reach his terrified eyes. He was afraid of me. He remembered the look in my eyes when I hit the accelerator. "Mother invited me," I said, my voice smooth, devoid of emotion. "Hello, Caleb." "Hello, Isabella." Isabella flinched. Caleb stepped forward, puffing out his chest. "Get out. You killed him. You don't get to grieve him." "Stop it." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. She stepped between us, looking from Caleb to me. Her eyes lingered on my face, on the thin scar running down my jaw, a souvenir from a prison fight. "I asked him to come. Today is about your father, not your petty jealousies." "Jealousy." Caleb laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "I'm the CEO of Hawke Industries. I'm married to the Vance heiress. What do I have to be jealous of? A shoe salesman." I smiled. It was the same professional smile I used when a customer asked for a size we didn't have. "You're right, Caleb. You won. I'm just here to pay my respects." I placed a single white chrysanthemum on the grave. Then I leaned in close to Caleb, invading his personal space. I smelled his expensive cologne, the scent of insecurity. "Enjoy the view from the top," I whispered, so only he could hear. "The fall is going to be spectacular." I turned to leave, but Eleanor caught my wrist. Her grip was desperate. "Julian, wait. Please. Come to the house for dinner. Just for an hour." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. The hand that had signed the consent form for the bone marrow extraction that ruined my health. "I have to work, Mrs. Hawke. But thank you for the invite." "I'll pay you," she blurted out. "I'll pay for your time." I paused. I looked at Leo's medical bills in my mind. Then I looked at Caleb, who was practically vibrating with rage. "My consultation fee has gone up," I said softly. "Anything," she whispered. Dinner at the Hawke estate was a grotesque pantomime of a family meal. The long mahogany table was set with silver and crystal, but the silence was deafening. I ate methodically. The food tasted like ash. Arthur, the driver, came in to pour wine. When he reached me, he squeezed my shoulder briefly. It was the only genuine human contact in the room. "So," Caleb began, swirling his wine. How is the retail life? Fitting feet all day. Must be humbling. It's honest work, I replied. Unlike some professions. Isabella spoke for the first time. Her voice was brittle. Julian, I heard you have a friend who is sick. I looked at her. There was no mockery in her eyes, only a strange, desperate sadness. Yes. If you need a specialist. She started. We have it covered. I cut her off. I didn't want her pity. I didn't want anything from the Vance family. Caleb slammed his glass down. Why are you even talking to him, Bella? He tried to kill me. He killed Dad. I didn't kill Dad, I said, my voice dropping an octave. The room went cold. I was aiming for you. Dad died saving a liar. A parasite. Caleb jumped up, his chair clattering backward. Get out. Mom, throw him out. Eleanor sat frozen at the head of the table. She looked at Caleb, red-faced and screaming, and then at me, cold and still. Sit down, Caleb, she said quietly. What? I said sit down. She slammed her hand on the table. This is my house. Julian is my guest. Caleb looked as if he'd been slapped. He sank back into his chair, seething. Julian, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. Arthur told me. He told me where you're living. It's not safe. Please. Move back here. The guest wing is empty. No, I said. Why? Are you trying to punish me? I'm not punishing you, Mrs. Hawke. I simply don't belong here. I am a felon. This is a house for respectable people. I stood up, wiping my mouth with the napkin. The dinner was delicious. Arthur, please bring the car around. As I walked to the door, Isabella followed me. Julian, she whispered in the hallway. I stopped but didn't turn. He hits me, she said. The words hung in the air. He blames me for the baby. He says I'm weak. He's not who we thought he was. I turned around. Her face was pale, a fading bruise hidden poorly by makeup on her collarbone. 3 years ago, I would have burned the world down for this woman. Now I just felt a dull ache. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only one who saw through him, she wept. Help me, please. I have files. I have records of the company accounts. He's skimming money from the Vance partnership. If my father finds out. If your father finds out, he'll cover it up to save face, I said. You know that. Not this, she said, pulling a small USB drive from her pocket. This isn't just skimming. It's money laundering. Illegal offshore accounts. If this gets out, he goes to prison. Real prison. She held the drive out to me. Take it. Destroy him, Julian. Finish what you started in the car. I looked at the drive. This was the weapon I needed. The key to the kingdom. I took it. Go back inside, Isabella. Before he misses you. The data on the drive was explosive. Caleb wasn't just incompetent. He was greedy and stupid. He was funneling money from the Hawke-Vance merger into shell companies, likely to pay off gambling debts or hush money. Leo sat at his computer, his face illuminated by the scrolling code. This is gold, Jules. But you can't just leak it. If you leak it, the stock tanks, and the Vance family buries the story. You need to use it to cut the head off the snake. I know, I said, smoking a cigarette by the window. I need Eleanor to see it first. I need her to be the one who swings the sword. Why? Leo asked. She let you rot in prison. Because I exhaled smoke into the rainy night. Taking his money isn't enough. I need to take his mother. That's what he took from me. It's the only fair exchange. Over the next 2 months, I played the dutiful son. I visited the estate on weekends. I didn't move in, but I let Eleanor buy me suits. I let her talk about the past. I listened to her revise history, nodding when she claimed she always knew I was special. It was a sickening performance, but it worked. Eleanor was lonely. Caleb was distant, paranoid, and abusive. I was the prodigal son returning, calm and steady. I also started planting seeds. Mom, have you checked the Q3 reports? The numbers seem off. Mom, Caleb looks tired. Is he gambling again? I heard rumors. Slowly, the doubt grew in her eyes. The breaking point came in November. It was my father's birthday. Caleb threw a lavish party at the estate, inviting the city's elite. He was drunk, loud, and clinging to a young model, ignoring Isabella completely. I stood in the corner, drinking water. Eleanor was beside me, watching Caleb with a frown. He's embarrassing the family, she murmured. He's celebrating, I said softly. He feels invincible. I signaled to Arthur. It was time. Arthur walked over to the AV system. Leo had hacked into the house network earlier that day. Suddenly, the music stopped. The massive screen behind the stage, which had been playing a loop of Caleb's achievements, flickered. Then a video began to play. It wasn't the financial records. It was something Leo had found deep in Caleb's cloud backups. A video from 4 years ago. The date stamp was 2 days before his leukemia diagnosis. It was Caleb, sitting in a bar, laughing with a man in a lab coat. So Dr. Evans. Caleb's voice boomed through the silent ballroom. How much to fake a blood report? I need something terminal. Something that requires a specific donor. A bone marrow transplant, the doctor laughed. That's painful for the donor. That's the point, Caleb sneered. I want to bleed him dry. I want him weak. And while he's in the hospital, I'll take his girl. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. I watched Eleanor. Her face went white, then gray. She swayed, grabbing my arm for support. She was hearing her beloved adopted son admit to mutilating her biological son for sport. She was realizing that the procedure she had forced me into, the one she drugged me for, was torture, commissioned by Caleb. Caleb stood frozen on stage, the glass slipping from his hand and shattering. Turn it off, he screamed. It's a deep fake. It's AI. Julian did this. He pointed at me. He's framing me again. But then the screen changed. It showed the financial records, the embezzlement, the stealing from the Vance family accounts. The guests began to murmur. Isabella's father, Mr. Vance, stepped forward, his face purple with rage. I felt Eleanor's grip on my arm tighten until her nails dug into my flesh. She was shaking violently. He lied, she whispered. About the cancer? I looked down at her. Yes, mother. He was never sick. I gave my bone marrow for nothing. You drugged me for nothing. She let out a sound, a low, animal keen of agony. She pulled away from me and walked toward the stage. Caleb saw her coming. Mom, listen to me. Smack. The sound of the slap echoed through the room. Eleanor struck him with everything she had. You monster, she screamed. I chose you. I chose you over my own blood. Caleb shoved her back. You chose me because you're a vain, shallow woman. You wanted a puppet, and Julian was too much like Dad. The crowd gasped. Caleb, realizing he had lost control, looked around wildly. His eyes landed on me. You, he snarled. He pulled a steak knife from a nearby table. You ruined everything. He charged. I didn't move. I had spent 3 years in a maximum security prison. I had learned how to fight for men who had nothing to lose. A drunk socialite with a butter knife was a joke. As he lunged, I sidestepped, caught his wrist, and twisted. The bone snapped with a wet crunch. Caleb screamed and dropped to his knees. I held his arm behind his back, forcing his face into the carpet. Arthur, I said calmly. Call the police. The fallout was swift. The video and the financial records were enough to put Caleb away for 15 years. Fraud, embezzlement, assault. The Vance family sued for annulment and damages, stripping him of every penny. Eleanor suffered a nervous breakdown. She was hospitalized for weeks. I visited her once, right before she was discharged. She was sitting in a wheelchair by the window, looking old and small. Julian, she wept when she saw me. My baby, can you ever forgive me? She reached out her trembling hands. I'll sign everything over to you. The company, the house, the estate. It's all yours. Just please come home. Let me be your mother again. I stood at the foot of the bed. I looked at this woman who had once been the center of my universe. I felt nothing. The hate was gone, but the love was gone too. The well was dry. I don't want the company, mother, I said gently. And I don't want the house. Then what do you want? She pleaded. Tell me. Anything. I want you to live a long life, I said. Alone. Her eyes widened in horror. You have your health. You have your money. You have the empty house you wanted so badly to be perfect. But you don't have a son. Caleb is in prison. And Julian died the day you gave him that glass of water. I turned to the door. Julian. No. Don't leave me, she screamed, struggling to get up. Nurses rushed in to restrain her. I walked out of the hospital and didn't look back. 6 months later, the rain had finally stopped. The sky over the city was a brilliant, piercing blue. I stood at the airport gate. Leo was sitting next to me looking better. The transplant had been a success. He had gained weight, and the color had returned to his cheeks. You sure about this?